Let's bring in Republican Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. Now, he negotiated part of the relief deal on the Federal Reserve's lending powers, and he won that provision and got that language in. Let me ask you, Senator, what is the state of play right now when it comes to the possibility of increasing these direct payments to be much higher than the $600 up to $2,000? And is it something that you support?
Well, the state of play is that we negotiated a bill, and the president's people were intimately involved every step of the way. Secretary Mnuchin was arguably one of the most involved people in this whole negotiation. There are a lot of provisions I don't like. There's provisions the Democrats don't like. This is what we were able to get to. And my suggestion would be, let's pass this. Let's get this signed. Let's get this into law. And we can have an ongoing discussion about whether there should be additional direct payments or not. My own view is I'm not a fan of these direct payments because the vast majority of the money inevitably goes to people who never had a loss of income. I mean, consider all the federal employees, millions of people across the country, never lost a dime of income. Why would we be sending them $600, much less $2,000? So, we're not in the same place we were in last March. I wasn't wild about the direct payments back in March, but in March, it was a fair question of whether we even had an economy because governors were so overreacting in terms of shutdowns and doing so much damage. So that took really, really extraordinary and sort of global intervention. We're at a very different place in December where we've had a very strong recovery. The unemployment rate is half of what it was. And the problems are very acute in certain industries, but they're not universal. So the help should be targeted.
Okay.
And this bill, for all its imperfections, that's what it tries to do.
So that was the COVID relief bill. There's also the Omnibus Bill, which is the large spending bill that got, this happens in December because there's not regular budget order. Take a listen to Congressman Andy Biggs and what he thinks the president should do with that bill.
Well, this is the worst bill. And it typifies the swamp because it's terrible both from a process and a substantive point of view. So I'm hoping, I've actually written a letter with a good number of my colleagues. We've delivered the letter asking the president to veto this bill.
And Senator, the New York Post, as it often does, captured some of the thinking about this bill, calling it a big stocking stiffers, of course, with a lot of things in it there for the special interest, but not for us, as they put it. We don't have regular budget order. These bills have been out there for a long time. People could have read them if they wanted to, but this is what happens. It all gets jammed into the very end, and then the Republicans and the Democrats can both, they all vote for it, but they all complain about it. Do you think the president is going to veto this bill?
Well, the problem is they're all one now, right? It was merged with the COVID bill.
Yeah.
Frankly, if it were the omnibus spending bill, the package of annual appropriation bills funding the government, if that were a freestanding bill, I would have voted no. But I felt that the COVID portion was so important that on balance, I decided to vote for the package. Look, there's no question we've got a completely dysfunctional Congress. What we should be doing is the annual appropriation process consisting of the 12 separate bills done sequentially, one at a time, subject to scrutiny and amendment. That's what we ought to be doing. It's been a long time since we've done it that way, and it's terrible, which is why I vote against these big omnibus bills as a general matter. But I do think it's different when you have this COVID emergency, and you alluded to what I think is extremely important, which is shutting down the temporary short-term emergency Fed facilities that our Democrats want to turn into a universal slush fund. So, look, I don't like where we are, but I think it's much more constructive to sign this, get this done, and then we can have conversations about what the next step is.
So you are not running for re-election. You announced that a little while ago. I imagine that one of the reasons is because you're frustrated with this process. You can speak a little bit more bluntly now, as you're not planning to run for re-election. Do you think that the process can be changed, and is there anybody in the Senate willing to try to make that difference?
There are a number of us that are having regular conversations about how we might change the Senate rules that would facilitate actually functioning. I'll just give you one simple example. Throughout all of American history, the Senate was famous for being a body of open debate and open amendment. So on any given bill, any given senator could offer pretty much any amendment on any subject. Well, the advantage of that is you could litigate any issue and get to a political consensus or outcome. Well, the fact is, in order to offer an amendment under our rules, it takes the unanimous consent of the entire Senate.
Right.
So any one senator can block any amendment, and so we don't do any amendments.
Yeah.
I'd like to change the rules to make it easier to offer an amendment. That would be a huge improvement.
Well, we'll see. And that would also make these people, any member who is advocating for a certain program, Kennedy Center funding, money for Pakistan gender studies, whatever it is, that they would have to argue it on the merits rather than just hiding behind a big omnibus bill like this. Senator
That's
Toomey,
exactly right.
Thank you.
And I could go down to the Senate floor on a big bill like this, and hopefully, preferably on the smaller subset bills freestanding, and offer an amendment to strike that funding. And we'd have a debate, and we'd have a vote, and we'd find out where people stand, and people would be accountable for the votes they cast.
It really should be a change that happens soon. Thank you for joining us, and Merry Christmas, sir.
Thanks for having me, Dana. You too.